What's up guys? So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to feel less lonely in conversations with other people. Personally, this is a problem that I used to struggle with a lot, and I have gained a lot of improvements over the years. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my own personal story and my own struggles with this idea, and hopefully some of it can help you. So let's dive right in. So first, if we think about breaking the loneliness barrier, all of it has to do with feeling lonely even when you're in a crowd and feeling alone even though you're surrounded by other people. And so, this guide is really going to help transform, some of the superficial chats that you're used to having into more meaningful talks. So first, let's kind of think about the loneliness paradox, because it honestly is a paradox. The first thing is we have to think about what is the impact that loneliness can have on your mental health. Well, it turns out that the Surgeon General, I don't know if anyone has seen this, has came out with a study. Smoking 15 cigarettes a day is equivalent to the health impact of what loneliness can do for you. And that's honestly unbelievable. And sorry for my terrible circle there. The second thing is there's a little bit of a social disconnect, and this is where the paradox comes from in terms of feeling lonely even though you're surrounded by other people. And here, what I would really love to emphasize, it's not about the quantity of your interactions, but it's about the quality. I remember when I was in college, I was such a people pleaser. And from that, I tried to just do right by everyone because I thought that's how I made friends. As long as I don't step on anyone's toes, then everyone liked me. Well, it turns out that I was true because everyone did like me, but they only were lukewarm towards me. So it wasn't that they hated me, but it wasn't that they loved me. I was in this weird middle ground where I didn't really create a lot of strong connections with people because I always was such a watered down version of myself. And the third reason why this is all kind of a paradox is because we really live a digital age dilemma where social media can increase feelings of isolation. Real connections don't happen often enough in face-to-face interactions. And so if you think about this more deeply, it actually is crazy. When social media first came out, we were the most connected that we had ever been in our entire life. I remember my parents' generation, the boomers, they got to talk and interact with people that they probably haven't seen or heard from in like decades, 10 or 20 years. And as time went on, in a weird way, we got so absorbed in the digital space that we kind of lost the reason for why we were even on social media in the first place. And since we have gone so far in that direction, there's gonna be a little bit of course correction back to maybe subtracting some technology from our lives. I know that in California, they have digital detox camps, which is hilarious, where the sole goal is for the entirety of the camp, you're gonna lock up your electronics and just solely focus on talking and hanging out with other people face to face. Okay, so now let's talk about some barriers to connection. And these are all super important. So the first one is, a fear of vulnerability. When it comes to vulnerability, opening up can feel risky, but I can't emphasize this enough. It's so necessary to create deeper connections. And the biggest mistake that I see people make, they express some vulnerability once and it doesn't go their way. So they completely write off the concept and tell themselves, because it didn't work out the first time, I am never going to be vulnerable again. The second barrier to connection is we're all a little bit vain. And because we're all a little bit vain, we constantly are thinking about our self-image. I mean, even for this video, I made sure to clean up a little bit, make sure I put on some lotion, didn't want to come on super crusty, in front of the camera, speaking to all of you guys. And don't get me wrong, sometimes my obsession with how I look can get in the way of me feeling authentic. And my advice to you guys is, if you worry about how you look or how you come across too much, then that is going to be one of the biggest barriers to you actually being able to develop like authentic and genuine relationships with people. The third barrier has to do with superficial talk. And so you hear it all the time. People hate small talk. It turns out anyone I have ever talked to who says they hate small talk actually has never been taught how to make small talk enjoyable. So we often can stop ourselves from even engaging in a conversation because we tell ourselves, I don't want to deal with that small talk. And because I don't want to deal with that small talk, I'm not even gonna make the gesture to initiate a conversation or talk to this person that I don't know or even barely know. Let me tell you that that is such a disservice, and we're gonna talk about how to make small talk enjoyable. Next, let's talk about how we can actually connect with people. One of the fundamental skills to connect with people has to do with what's called active listening. The beautiful thing about active listening is that it is broken down by key pillars, and each pillar is so important to learn and practice to be able to become a good active listener. So the first pillar is make eye contact. And by making eye contact, you really show someone that you're present, and it builds a lot of trust and encourages openness. You've seen it in all the movies where someone is feeling a little bit apprehensive, or someone is feeling a little bit sketchy or getting sketchy vibes from someone else. A lot of times that has to do with not being able to look someone in the eyes and just hold it for a little bit. If you struggle to look people in the eyes, a lot of it can do with the self-image obsession that we were talking about earlier. And if you can reframe it as no one cares how I look because they don't even care how they look. Or sorry, no one cares how I look. And so because of that, then that should help you bring out that more authentic version of yourself because you aren't constantly worried about how you're being interpreted. The second thing is asking follow-up questions. Okay, so asking follow-up questions is so important because it shows a genuine interest in the other person and makes them feel like you're actually listening and that you care with what they're saying. And the beautiful thing about asking follow-up questions is that encourages the other person to open up even more than they felt comfortable with in the beginning because they feel like their answers are actually being heard. And if you feel like your answers are actually being heard, you are more likely to open up further with someone. So that's just a quick little trick. The third one is summarizing and reflecting. So here, paraphrasing is really important for a couple of reasons. You always want to paraphrase back what you heard someone say to do two things. First one is to show them you're listening, as we've been saying. And then the second is genuinely to confirm your understanding. I can't tell you how many times I have paraphrased something back to someone and they actually told me isn't exactly right. And whether that has to do with me misinterpreting what they said or them interpreting it in a specific way to make me understand it that way, it doesn't really matter. What just matters is for both sides to get on the same page. And then once you're on the same page, then you can continue to move forward in the discussion. And so, once you take those skills of active listening, you can think about, how to cultivate, empathy and authenticity. When it comes to cultivating empathy and authenticity, there are three things that you should really think about. The first one is stepping into their shoes. Just imagine the other person's perspective. Oftentimes we can view the world through our own lens. And because of that, we have trouble understanding what someone's perception or point of view is, especially when it differs from ours. Next one is share your truth. If you think a conversation is boring, or if you think small talk is boring, and you haven't even been the first one to open up in the conversation yet, then how can you expect the other person to feel comfortable if you haven't done it? And so by taking the initiative and taking the lead, you can open up the vulnerable part of the discussion by going first, and that'll really show the other side that, hey, maybe this is a safe space where I can talk. And then the third one is embrace imperfection. Earlier, we were talking about being obsessed with your own image, and a lot of that has to do with us thinking, I need to be perfect, or I need to make sure that this other person doesn't know my flaws. The beautiful thing is that if you actually embrace perfection, in a conversation, it shows the other person that you're human. And because they know you're human, then they feel safe enough to be the amazing, imperfect version of themselves to you. Now, here is one of my favorite superpowers in the entire world, and that is the power of curiosity. When it comes to curiosity, there are a few ways you can think about it. The first one is just think about someone else as a fascinating mystery that you want to learn more about. If you've ever seen Sherlock Holmes, his sole job is to just dig deeper into someone, or dig deeper into understanding why someone is the way that they are. And if you can look other people in this way, then it's almost impossible not to be fascinated with what made you the person you are today. What are the things that give you a lot of enthusiasm in your life? What are the stories of your worst heartbreak? And when you look at someone in that way of being a kind of a mystery to unravel, then you can start using certain questions to bring out those like really thoughtful and impactful subjects and topics. Some of those questions can be what's called open-ended questions, and you'll see this advice all over online, which is asking what if, or asking why. The third thing is just always look at interactions as a chance to learn something new. The beautiful thing is everyone has unique knowledge to share, and if you don't think that you can learn anything from this other person, then your ego might be getting in the way from you actually growing as a person. To conclude, how can you actually overcome social challenges when you encounter them? And I've kind of thought about it as a four-step process to overcoming those social challenges. The first one is, if you can't even name your fear or name what you're scared about, then how can you even address it? So step number one is to identify your fear and name what actually scares you about social interactions. So for example, for me, I have a lot of fear around someone seeing me as less than because of my eczema. And I've always been insecure about my skin. I've always been insecure about my eczema. And that's the one fear that always pops up in my head whenever I'm talking to someone or talking to someone new. That named fear for me is, I'm scared that person X will judge me for my eczema and see me as less than. Now, number two, challenging those negative thoughts. So if I use my example, which is I'm scared someone will see me as less than because of my eczema, a way that I can challenge this, thinking about how every single person has their own insecurities. Those insecurities can actually make them compassionate to other people, because anything that you're struggling with, someone has struggled with some version of that in a different way. So for me, I have insecurities around my skin, but I've actually never had insecurities about my weight. So I could be talking to someone who has deep insecurities about their weight, and by me being insecure about my skin, then I can have some compassion that this person probably has had something that they're insecure about too, and it's not likely that they'll judge me. And then even if they do, that's always a good sign, because it gives you the perfect opportunity to not have to waste your time to be friends or talk to this person. The third one is start with small steps. So for me, since I'm insecure about my eczema at times, I'm not gonna go and walk shirtless at a Santa Barbara pier when my skin is acting up and like crazy. For me, small steps is, hey, let me just kind of open up a little bit to the people around me about what I'm going through, and just see how they react. And then the fourth and last one, celebrate progress. So think about where you started and how far you've come. By looking at the difference between those two positions, you'll be able to see, I actually came a long way. And if you can convince yourself that you have came a long way, then that's the first start to the evidence that you need to start building real confidence, which is, I've done it before, taken a step forward, and I can continue to do it again, and now and in the future. And so as we conclude this video, the one thing I really just wanted to have everyone take away is that if you're feeling lonely, or if you're feeling not understood or not seen or not felt, sometimes it can be worthwhile to dig a little bit into how are you coming across as a communicator? Are you emanating, a sort of energy that people feel comfortable coming up to you to talk, or coming up to you to open up? Oftentimes we can say things like, that conversation wasn't interesting, no one wants to open up to me, I struggle to make friends. Honestly, sometimes you can struggle with those things because of you. And there's nothing wrong with working a little bit to improve your social skills or improve your communication. Making friends or making connections or helping people feel seen, heard, felt, and understood are all skills that can be learned. And yes, sometimes it comes more naturally to someone else than it does you. But guess what? You have things that come more naturally to you than other people. So in that way, the world is kind of fair. I'm Timothy, and I make these videos on communication once to twice a week. And so if you felt like this content was helpful, please let me know down in the comments below, or any questions that you might have. Thank you.